is a Women's History Month special presentation for colored girls who have considered politics.
It's empowerment, it's sisterhood, it's solidarity, it's togetherness.
On SiriusXM Progress 127.
Thank you so much, everyone. Welcome to a SiriusXM special presentation for Women's History Month. I'm Zerlina Maxwell. I am the Director of Progressive Programming here at SiriusXM, Channel 127, the Progress Channel, and we're doing this in conjunction with Channel 126 Urban View. So I'm really excited to be joined by my idols, right? I mean, I feel like I am so fortunate to have come into contact with all of you throughout the course of the last year, particularly Minyon, who sat so close to me in the campaign office. And I would just scoot on in and complain mostly, but also get sage-and advice from Minyon. So I'm joined today by 4 of the 5 brilliant Black women who make up the Colored Girls. And you're going to hear in the beginning of this panel where they got that name. It's a really fascinating story. To my right is Minyon Moore. She was a senior advisor to the Hillary Clinton campaign. Next to her, you have Reverend Leah Daughtry, who was the twice CEO of the Democratic Convention. To her right is Donna Brazile, who I feel like doesn't really need an introduction, right? I mean, we all know who Donna Brazile is, first Black woman to be a campaign manager for a presidential campaign. And then lastly, all the way at the end there is Yolanda Caraway, and she's also a Democratic strategist and operative for many, many years. But they all met in one particular way. So I want to go first to Leah. And you came to the campaign office, and we wrangled all of the young Black staffers. I think Liz, actually, you were Elizabeth Grambling in the audience, one of my former colleagues. And she, Leah, when you came, you gave us a little bit of the origin story of the Colored Girls. So I wanted to go to you first and tell the audience here and the listeners of SiriusXM, how did you guys get the nickname the Colored Girls?
Well, first, thank you, Zerlina, for having us. I love being in the company of my sisters, so it's great to be able to share our story with your audience. The Colored Girls actually started with Donna and Minyon, who were working on the Dukakis campaign in whatever year that was, 88. And they were seated up on the floor with where all the staff were, and there came a day that the campaign management told them that they were going to move them to another floor. And what that effectively would mean was that all of the people of color would be on one floor and the management of the campaign, which was all white, would be on another floor. And they understood that that would take them out of the decision-making loop that happens every day in such a fast-paced environment. So they got together and decided they were not moving. It was Donna, Minyon, and a few others, Susan Rice, and so forth. And they commiserated, tried to figure out what they were going to do. And then Donna took a piece of paper and wrote on the piece of paper, for colored girls, we shall not be moved. Put it on the sign on the conference room door. And ultimately, they were not moved. And it became the gathering place for anybody in the campaign who was of similar values and concerned about community politics, concerned about how our communities move forward. So that's how the Colored Girls were born. And we've been, I joined in later, Tina came in later, Yolanda came in later, but we've been knit together through a similar understanding of the power of community and the importance of our politics moving the community forward. Right. And how do we advance our people. So for us, it's not a matter of being colored. Right. It's a value system, and anybody can be a colored girl if you've got those same values. How do we move the places we live and the people who care about it, and the people who don't necessarily feel that they have voices? Mm-hmm. How can we be a voice for them and move them forward into the destiny that God designed for them?
Absolutely. I love that you talk about it in terms of values. And Minyon, one of the things I learned from you on the campaign is you always have to go into every meeting and every room with the community that you're coming from in mind, right? So you're sitting at the table as yourself, but you're also there to speak on behalf of people who are not at the table. how do you take that mindset into rooms now? When we're in tumultuous times, we have President Trump at the helm, and that's going to be really hard for our community. So how do we continue to go into those rooms? What mindset do you take into these spaces to speak on behalf of our communities?
I don't think it changes just because you change presidents. I think that's the beauty of knowing what your moral compass is and knowing what you have to offer when you're in that room. And I think what is required of us in this time more than any other time is courage, because you have to have the courage to speak out when people are quiet. You have to have the courage to speak out when it's going to be different. You have the courage to challenge. You have to have the courage to challenge a president who ultimately will probably blast you on Twitter. But you have to have that courage, because the people that got up and that's sitting in this room, these are the talented people. These are the people that we're thankful for having you here this early in the morning listening to us. But there's a vast number of people, in particular African American women, who gave so much to this Democratic Party, who never have a champion, who never have a voice. And as Reverend Jackson used to teach us, they take the early bus. So we have an obligation to continue to talk and to speak out for those who are left out and locked out and who want us to be a voice for them. So I think more than anything, it requires us to just keep having courage. And then when you have a CBC that is so strong, that is so forthright, then we also on the outside have to continue to support them.
Absolutely. And Donna, you, speaking of courage, recently wrote an article for Time.com where you were really honest about many things that transpired during the course of the campaign. And, some of it was controversial and some of it was we're still finding out, right? Because there's going to be a lot of investigating that's going to be required in order to get to the bottom of what happened. Can you speak to, in terms of reflecting on the past 2 years, speak to, where you currently are and how you feel about, what happened in the campaign and some of the things you talked about in your op-ed for Time?
Well, first of all, I want to also thank you for having us here this morning. It's always good to see my sisters and also to have a conversation like we're having this morning. Let me start by saying that when we put that sign up, it was a collective effort. We did it at night because we knew that certain people had cocktail hours. We didn't even understand cocktail hours then, although now I would say that I'm a big fan of cocktail hours. But we saw ourselves not just as individual women who had made it to the table, but we saw ourselves as part of a legacy of those who fought to open doors of opportunity for all people. And so our room never became a segregated place or a place where only Black women gather. In fact, Minyon, if you recall, we had more white folks coming in our room wanting to sit with us and be a part of what we were about, because they saw us and saw what we were trying to do as something that was expansive, something that created opportunity, and something that allowed us to speak up and be a part of something that is very important. Now, anyone who knows my history know that I'm not afraid of controversy. I'm not afraid to stir the pots, and I'm not afraid to say things that I believe to be true. And I'm also not afraid to repent and ask and seek forgiveness. Thank you, Leah. Although everybody knows that I love use big words, and often they are words that you don't see in the dictionary unless we make them up. But I think we all understand and recognize our legacy. The women who opened doors for us, the C. Dolores Tuckers, the Shirley Chisholm, the Willie Barrows, the Addie Whites, the Dorothy Heights, and yes, the Maxine Waters, the Eleanor Holmes Norton, the people that we continue, Marcia Fudge, Stephanie Tubbs Jones. I mean, we love to fight. We live for a fight, if truth be told, although we would rather not fight you. But if we have to fight you, we will fight you. But in all of my life, in the things I've fought, I've never fought a Russian military intelligence unit And anyone who has ever been involved in politics knows that you go up against opponents. Sometimes they're Democratic because you're a Democrat and it's a primary. Sometimes it's Republican because it's a general election. But how many of you have ever experienced cyber warfare, cyber espionage? How many of you understand what a disinformation campaign? How many of you understand that when emails are sent and they're out of context and you just have content, how they can be weaponized to sow discard? Well, I can tell you so much about cyber warfare. The intended victim was not the men and women who work at the Democratic National Committee. The intended victim was Hillary Clinton, who was running for president of the United States. And the rest of us, me included, we're collateral damage. And how do you come to understand what that means in the context of what we call modern cyber warfare? Well, I have that experience now. And it's an experience that I hope to help others understand, because if this is the modern warfare that we all have to participate in, we all better get ready for it. And I'm grateful for those who stood by us and understood that it was warfare. I mean, for months, with the exception of the women sitting here and Tina, who's not here, but she's always with us in spirit. I mean, you would have thought I was crazy. I mean, when I would call Minyon, God bless her, and she didn't hang up on me, I had people who really thought I was going crazy. In fact, Zerlina, I stopped going on TV because everybody started saying, well, how do you know they're Russian? Well, God damn it, I know the difference between America and something that's foreign. And ain't nobody ever cussed me out in those kind of words, because I don't even understand those words, because I can cuss you back. This was a massive campaign. And when you see people like former Vice President Dick Cheney. I've never agreed with Dick Cheney in my entire life. But when he said this was an act of war, I have to agree with the former Vice President. It was an act of war. And we better understand the ramifications. Because if they can take down a woman of stature like Hillary Clinton with bogus stuff, and then you have to disprove the negative to make it somehow or another truthful. You cannot. And when the national media, and listen to me, my friends, when the national media is complicit also, and carrying on the fake narrative, the fake emails, the spoofing, and then you have to go out there and try to make it factual. So PowerFacts or the Washington Post fact check, or somebody else can fact check it. When you have your own emails and you know the truth. But you know, I go back to what I said before about legacy. We also come from a people that have been courageous. There were twice in the campaign that I had to reach into my Bible and I read Esther, because I wanted the courage of Esther. But then when I didn't have that Bible next to me, I also knew about Harriet Tubman, her resiliency, her tenacity, her ability to go back and back and back and back and forth. That was what carried me through. So I'm grateful always to the friendship of my sisters here, but also grateful for the legacy of those who have come before us.
Thank you, Donna. And this is a special Women's History Month presentation on SiriusXM Progress. Yolanda, in terms of dealing with cyber warfare and the power of the Black women's vote, it seems to me like, I wasn't prepared for that. You know, none of the meetings that me personally sat in on as a part of the campaign was dealing with that. It seems like that's something that's way up here on a different level than many of the issues that we care about on a day-to-day basis. So where does the future of Black women engaging in the political process stand if we have something like Russia attacking our government and our political institutions in this way? It seems like that's something that is way, way up above sort of where we're usually existing in politics.
It is. And I don't think anybody has the answer to that question right now. In 40 years I've been involved in politics, and I've never seen anything like this in my life. I don't think anybody else has either. I mean, just the fact that another country could come in and steal our election. I think any country, there would have been mass repercussions around that. And I don't know why nothing's happening. I don't know why it's taking so slow. And I think everybody is questioning. But, you know, we're going to resist, and we're going to keep on, you know, Black women, we're always going to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. So we're going to stay involved. I was just at a conference last week with Minyon and Leah in Miami, 160 professional Black women. And they wanted to get engaged. We had all kinds of topics of discussion, and the one they were most excited about was the one that when we talked about the election and politics, and they wanted to know how to stay engaged. And the group left, with a plan. And I think black women are doing this all around the country. We showed up. We showed up. We did what we were supposed to do, and I think we will continue to do that.
And thank you so much, Yolanda, for that answer, because I think in many of the conversations I've had with friends, particularly black women, they're like, well, we were already suffering in many different forms. And so it's not as if a President Donald Trump is going to upend, the prosperous success we've had on a broad scale, right? I think that marginalized communities have been marginalized and will continue to be marginalized, but for our efforts. And so, Minyon, did you want to jump in, Minyon?
Yeah, I actually think that's one answer, but I also think that it goes back to what do we do in this space during this time? And there's so many organizations out here, like we heard from Brittany Packner with her Campaign Zero. So we got to think about the organizations that we can also help build up during this period, because, the safety net is being pulled from under good, fair-minded people. And we have an obligation to just continue to push back and support these organizations and to make sure that we, especially for African American women who might be thinking about getting or running for election, I think that's a hopeful promise for us, because they're thinking about it from everything from school board to aldermen to councilmen to Congress, now to Senate, and now governor's races. And so I think our collective minds have to get around the fact that, number one, we should be elected to some of these higher offices, because we vote in record-breaking numbers. Nobody has to tell us to vote. Nobody has to tell us why we have to vote. The question I want to ask some people, what were you thinking about the weekend of September when we were all getting prepared for the election? What were you telling your children? What were you telling young women? I know what we were telling our young women. We were on the phone saying, you getting ready to vote? Right. Are you prepared? You got your ID? So what were you saying to the young women who now have to suffer under the hands of a presidency where we have no idea where it's going? Right. So for us, our speak up, speak out is just natural. And I say continue. Speak up, speak out when you can. Use all of your social media networks. Become coalition builders. Build allies across lines of race, color, creed. Become leaders. Because I think if we step out front, we're so busy figuring out the day. Right. Until we don't even understand our own natural leadership. We are leaders in the political space right now. There's no other group in American history that votes in such a consistent pattern as black women. So we need to harness that, and maybe we need to start showing people why it's important that they exercise that very precious right to vote, because I think some people forget.
Right.
And certainly, I think, to Minyon's point, Reverend Jackson, with whom we all work, says, when America gets a cold, black America gets pneumonia. Right. Just because we survived slavery doesn't mean we trying to go back. Yeah. Right. So I think we should not get settled into I came of age in the age of Ronald Reagan, right? Mm-hmm. Ketchup was a vegetable, right? So I don't want to go back to that. Right. I mean, it was bad, and I lived through it, and I've thrived. But that doesn't mean that I say, well, it's just I lived through it before, so I'm gonna just deal with my reality. We can change the way this country functions. We can change the way this country operates. 30% of eligible African-American voters are not registered to vote. Mm-hmm. Imagine if we voted to the totality of our strength. If those 30% were registered, the Congress would look a whole hell of a lot different. Mm-hmm. The Senate would look different. We would have a level of political power that exceeds what we have now if we voted to our full strength. We're doing pretty well at the 70%, but imagine if 90% of our people were registered to vote and went to vote. And so we can be leaders. We are leaders, and we can take the leverage that we have in the economic base. We spend $1 trillion a year, the African American community. $1 trillion, that's trillion with a T, in the economic sector. What if we leverage that economic power and said, this is where we will spend our money. These are the companies that we will support, and we only want to support the companies that support us, that build in our communities, that invigorate our communities, that honor our children and honor our culture. And if you're not going to do that, we're just going to spend our $1 trillion someplace else.
Right.
We can change the way that America functions if we will harness our power.
I just want to add one other point to the power part of this. Everybody thinks ACA went down just because the Republicans decided not to vote. Let me just give you a factoid. 23 of the districts that they have to keep, Hillary Clinton won. 24 of the districts that we have to get back, 23 of them she won. And most of them are held by either marginal Republicans or moderate Republicans. So we have an opportunity if we just stay woke, don't lull into this. We can't do anything. We got to stay woke.
Can I?
Sure. You're listening to a Women's History Month special presentation. Go ahead, Donna.
So I was reading the other day about the travel ban, and we all think about the travel ban and Muslims and Muslim countries. But when you dig deeper into this whole travel ban, half of those countries that are on that list are in Africa. And just recently there was a meeting to talk about Africa development, and many of the Africans who were scheduled to come could not get visas to travel to America. So Minyon says stay woke. I mean, I understand it's coming faster than ever before, but can you imagine the racial profiling of the travel ban? That's number one. Number two, later this year, the Children's Health Program expires. And here's a program that benefited many minority kids, black and brown kids. And if this program is somehow or another put on the chopping block, and Mr. Trump and the Republicans decide not to continue it, many of our kids will be impacted. We already know that maternal health will be impacted. We already know that summer school programs, if the Trump budget, the so-called slim budget, they call it the skinny budget, that's the starvation budget, because it will cut off summer programs, not for fiscal year 2018, which starts in October. It cuts off programs for this summer. After school programs cut this year. Now, why do we have to know this? It's because if you're going to be an advocate, if you're going to be out there in the public square, you need to understand the information. You need to be read up. You need to know why this impacts you. And for our millennials, who are the majority of the voters now, millennials, not us baby boomers, although I still love our music better, but, it's millennials. We have to engage them, empower them to take their seats at the table. And I know many of them want to just come and sit at the table. Hell, none of us came to the table and had a seat. Some of us had to bring in folding chairs or even sit
on the floor.
Or sit on the floor and didn't get paid, Yolanda.
Right.
And that was the best thing about it, because they said they would pay us Friday, but they paid us in the best possible way. They gave us that experience and service. And so this is why it's important to be engaged, to stay woke, and to be involved. And don't be afraid of controversy. I know some of y'all are so, caught up in your careers and caught up in everything. I'm about to reinvent my life for the third time. I'm 57 years old. I'm so excited about it. I keep telling Minyon I want to be an actress, so help me write a play. Tell Yolanda to use all her Hollywood contacts. Shit, I'll play myself. But I want to continue to engage this group of millennials, because they are going to be the powerful group for the future. They're the ones who are going to help us move this country forward. And I tell them when I teach, I said, look, you put a black man in office, and then you got weary. So stop being weary. There's no loss of hope. There's more opportunity than ever before. But if you give up your power, of course we're going to continue to elect the Donald Trumps in the world. Take a look at what Minyon just said. There are 23 out of 24 of these districts Hillary carried. And if Hillary can carry it, given all of the negativity and the stuff that came after us, just imagine what we can do 2 years from now if people get out and vote.
Yolanda, in terms of keeping this level of engagement up, as Minyon alluded to, part of why ACA went the replacement plan went down was because people are showing up to town hall meetings. People are calling their elected officials, and you see some Congresspeople on TV say, "I got 1,000 calls, against this bill and 2 for this bill." So the message is very clear. How can we, as Black women in our own communities, impart that message to our family members and our friends and our neighbors that we need to make those calls? We need to show up at the town hall meetings. What are the methods in which we can communicate that message effectively?
Well, I think Minyon put it pretty well. We've got all the social media avenues. You've got your churches. You've got your fraternities and sororities. I mean, we've got to maintain being active during this time. I mean, it's just so important. We can't sit down. We can't get lazy. I think Donna made a good point. We elected President Obama, and we got happy. We got lazy. And, had we worked as hard during those 8 years as we did during the past couple years trying to elect Hillary, we might have won this thing. So we can't, you just can't stop. You can't get lazy. You have to stay on top, and you have to stay motivated and stay woke.
Absolutely. And Reverend Daughtry, in terms of the future of the Democratic Party, in full disclosure, I'm on the Transition Advisory Committee, assisting the DNC with hiring and sort of shaping the future. Where does the Democratic Party and the DNC, where do they stand sort of in shaping this future? Because I think that the future is going to look a little bit different than the past. It's going to be more diverse. There are going to be more women. There are going to be more women of color at the table. So what do we need to do in order to make sure that the DNC and the Democratic Party represent what the party actually looks like, the people that are showing up to vote for Democrats?
Well, we're very fortunate to have just elected a new party chair, Tom Perez, who had served at the Justice Department and the Civil Rights Division, and also as a United States Labor Secretary. And I was very honored that he asked me to co-chair his transition at the DNC. So we are undertaking now a top-to-bottom review of all of the systems at the DNC, and because we understand we're living in a different time, we have new tools that are at our disposal. There are new communities that need to be touched, that need to be part of the Democratic message. They may not be Democrats, but we share the same values. And to really understand the Democratic Party through a broader lens, we understand that we're the big tent party. That's what we say. And so we don't run the litmus test that the Republicans often do. We know we don't agree on everything, but as I like to say, you don't have to agree on everything to agree on the main thing. So we are undertaking that review, bringing new voices to the table. We're so pleased that you're serving on the Transition Advisory Committee, and we've put together a group that is very broad and very diverse with brand new voices at the table to really make sure that we are listening and incorporating these new ideas. Folks like Ajen Poo, who leads the Domestic Workers Alliance, organizing women of color who are domestic workers. She's done tremendous work in that regard. She's never been part of our conversation, and now she is. So people like that, and DeRay McKesson, and so many others who are now offering their ideas that we have actively reached out to say, please come help us. Help us figure out how to language this. Help us figure out what we're missing. Help us figure out what we don't know. And let's include these new voices in how we're shaping the party from the top to the bottom. I always say it starts with the leadership. If the leadership is clear about diversity, about hiring, about contracting, about vision, about goals, then all of that filters down. And we're lucky to have Tom at the head. And, these things are my passion. I've spent my career along with these ladies kicking down doors and bringing new people to the table. And so I think his commitment to that is clear. And we're looking forward to the reinvention of the Democratic Party. We invite ideas. Please go to our website. We get surveys. There's a survey. Go on, fill it out. We read them and respond to them and help to get people involved. And that's really what we're looking at. This is a total reinvention, and we're excited about it.
I'm excited about it because I think that, party institutions, you need to evolve and grow and, reflect the people who are supporting you and are funding you as well. Minyon, in terms of last year, we spent a lot of time together on the campaign. What are some of the biggest lessons you learned from last year? Obviously, it was completely crazy in sort of how it turned out, and nobody could have anticipated that during. But when you sit here today, what are some of the lessons you take away from last year?
Well, first I want to say that, and you ladies in the room will be proud to know that Hillary had some of the most qualified African American women and women of color to work for her campaign in the history of any campaign. I mean, I got to meet Zerlina during that campaign, and many other women in that campaign. I think for me, having worked with President Clinton and then now Secretary Clinton, part of what, I'll tell this quick story. I spoke with a group at the campaign. It was 22 days out. And so it was our admin group, and it was about 50 kids in there. And so one young woman, African-American woman, she asked the last question, and she said to me, so what is your greatest hope and your greatest fear about the campaign? So I said, my greatest hope is that, we will elect a woman president for the first time in the history of America. She is intimately qualified. She will serve this country well. She will make sure that our communities and communities that look like her and us are served well. And then she said, well, what is your greatest fear? And I said, my greatest fear is that they're Clintons. And they have always pushed the envelope. They have always pushed the needle. And you never know what's lurking behind them. And that was 22 days out. 11 days in, that's when we got another bombshell with Comey, which was, in fact, nothing. Then we got, WikiLeaks and all of that. So I will say this. My greatest fear is that we have to be prepared for new types of wars. And for those of us who are not running for office and who are thinking about running for office, you have to prepare in different ways. Once your hurdle was, I just got to get me a poster and I got to get money. I got to raise money. Now your hurdles are I got to get a data analytics person. I got to get a poster and I got to get a cyber expert. So all of these new things these new hurdles can be new opportunities. So I'm hoping that through this experience, through what Donna has had to go through, and, our heart goes out to our sister who has carried a tremendous burden, not just for our people, but for the entire Democratic Party. I'm hoping that we see this as an opportunity to never let this happen to us again. And also to redouble our efforts, because women are qualified to hold these offices, by the way. Hillary Clinton was more than qualified. And by the way, she was elected president. Now we can, just as Al Gore was. So I'm just going to stand on that. I think I just will stand on that. So I think we just have to be diligent. And we have, the sexy things is what the non-sexy things are the things that Leah concentrates on. I mean, she has this expertise in making sure infrastructures are in place and making sure the widgets and, while she's looking at the strategy, God has given her this magnificent gift to just see the whole picture, and she can see all of the holes. So I do think that we, in terms of all the lessons we learned that cyberspace is a problem. We've learned that Black women vote, so how do we keep them energized and keep them ready? We've learned that young people vote when they are inspired. Right. Yeah. So all of these things are lessons, I think, are valuable lessons going into 2018. In fact, going into November.
2017 with Virginia, New Jersey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. You're listening to a SiriusXM Women's History Month special presentation. And Donna, in terms of what Minyon alluded to with the cyber warfare, I think, in part, some people don't understand exactly how it worked. So just to make things clear, it wasn't just that they hacked the DNC, it's that they released the emails at probably the most opportune time for hurting Hillary's campaign. It was strategic leaks. It wasn't just we hacked it and then we released them all at the same time. Can you talk a little bit about what it looked like from the inside of the DNC to have, emails come out at really the worst possible moments for the campaign overall?
Well, cyber warfare is defined as actions by a nation state to penetrate another nation's computer system or network for purposes of causing damage or disruptions. So imagine if, many of you who have email accounts, imagine if your emails were hacked. But the only emails that were released to the public were emails that, say, contain your conversations with your best friends or your nutty conversations with someone that you were trying to break up with, whatever it might be. And get this. What happened was it wasn't the full extent of the DNC emails that were released. It was selectively released to sow discord. So emails that pertain to Bernie Sanders were released. Emails that pertain to Martin O'Malley or in the case of I have to remember their names now. Martin O'Malley, Jim Webb, Lincoln Chafee, the other candidates, they were not released. So we immediately knew that, and it wasn't all of the DNC staffers. It was, again, selective. So we had to deal with the impact of that. But one thing that I would like to caution everyone is that as the chair of the party, and Leah has been convention manager twice. I've been chair twice. But as the chair of the party, I had to take note not just of the selective emails that were released, also cleaning up our system to avoid constant attacks. We were attacked up to the last minute. But many of our donors, as well as our staff and others, they had their personal information compromised. So in addition to your name, for example, if you've been to the White House for Easter egg roll or White House for a Christmas party, that information was also selectively released. And by law, the DNC is legally responsible. So in addition to the DNC being hacked and sowing discord between Bernie and Hillary, I was also dealing with the fact that I had donors whose lives were being interrupted. We were constantly harassed, threatened, death threats daily. The DNC has a whole new security infrastructure. It's like you're going into the TSA without taking off your shoes just to get into the party. We had to take all these extraordinary measures to protect ourselves. So for those of you who use Gmail, Yahoo, AOL, by the way, get rid of AOL. Please make sure you have a two-step a verification process so that no one can go in there and change your password, and stop using passwords that people can easily identify. These are all of the steps we had to take. But Minyon made a very important point. I'll close it with this. A few days before the election, Director Comey went public and said that Hillary campaign still had to answer questions regarding her emails. But as we found out just recently, a week ago, Donald Trump was under investigation, and that never came to light. At the time when Director Comey went public with the information about Hillary, my comment in the New York Times that day was, it was an 18-wheeler that hit us. Mm-hmm. And what disappointed me so much, and I said this publicly, was that the DNC was still cooperating with the FBI over the cyber attack. And the selective leaking of emails. And at no time did anyone acknowledge what we were going through. And I thought that was unfair. That was an unfair advantage to Donald Trump and the Trump campaign, who, by the way, on July 27, Donald Trump publicly encouraged the Russians to hack us more, and which they did, by the way. Yeah, so this is something that we have to learn. I'm still sorry that it caused so much division and dissension. I have no problem saying I'm sorry. It's not my fault, but damn it, I'll say it so that people can learn how to heal from it. We were hacked, and this was a crime. And I'm looking forward, when someone is impacted as a crime victim, I'm looking forward to this being mediated, and I hope the FBI completes its investigation and that the DNC is able to somehow or another recover from what happened. We spent millions of dollars protecting our infrastructure, protecting our staff, and I get very emotional. But this weekend I spent time in Nebraska because we buried a staff person. And I went to his memorial service. And that also is caught up into this entire drama. So don't be fooled by what happened. We will come back. We will, as Minyon said, protect our infrastructure, protect our democracy. But remember, this is not a partisan thing. The nation was under attack by the Russians. And for everybody who wants to put their blinders on, do so at your own expense. But if it can happen to the DNC, it can happen to any organization, any institution, any nonprofit. And just remember, if it happens to you, if your emails are hacked and they are selectively leaked to sow discord between you and your boyfriend, or you and your sister, or you and your company, whatever, be prepared for it. Because that's what we all had to undergo.
And I think Donna wanted to say that AOL is a fine company.
Yes, she did.
Just to ensure that you have two-factor authentication.
Along with Yahoo, Hotmail, and all the other hot messes. Hot messes.
But the other thing that was interesting last week in Director Comey's testimony is he said that the Trump campaign has been under investigation since July.
Yeah.
Amen.
But they didn't see fit or feel an obligation to let the American people know about that.
Right.
But they felt an obligation to let the American people know that he was looking at Secretary Clinton's emails.
Duplicate emails.
Right,
emails.
It wasn't even new emails. So there's the double standard there where it appears that someone had their finger on the scale. If I would have liked to know that the Trump campaign was under investigation,
right?
Why didn't we know that? Why didn't he tell us that? But he felt he had to tell us on the other side. So you see the double standard there and the clear preference for one candidate over another.
And he's actually said, I wish I had, let Democrats know more about what was going on with the investigation. I'm like, you mean like sending a letter?
Debbie
showing up
was a member of Congress.
Right.
The other former vice chair, Tulsi Gabbard, was a member of Congress. All you had to do was tell your congressional liaison to call. I mean, this did not require you to call our quote-unquote help desk.
Right.
That's like going to Best Buy and you get the Geek Squad when you're trying to return your computer. You know you want to talk to the manager.
Right. That's really good analogy. I like that. Minyon, I know that you wanted to talk about your friend Yolanda.
Yes.
And the work that she's doing with the Caraway Group.
Yeah.
You want me to talk about it?
No, I want to talk about
She wanted to talk about you.
Because she's quiet down there. And what people don't know, your listening audience, is most of us are sitting here and we are involved in the party because we stand on Yolanda's shoulders. Yolanda was the first person who had a high-level position at the Democratic National Committee, and she opened the doors wide open for women and women of color back in the 80s, right?
Yeah. 80s, early 80s.
And so I don't want us to lose that in her quietness, because she doesn't have to talk anymore because she's paid her dues.
She opened the door for everyone.
Yes, right.
And now we just do the talking.
Yeah, she's our fashion consultant. You don't look right today. You look patriotic, as she told me today.
Thank you.
That's very nice of you.
Right before I went on stage at the Democratic Convention, I had to go and let Yolanda look, and she told me I looked okay. I felt much.
I love that.
That was part of my job at the convention, to check out everybody before they went on stage.
It's very important. It's national television.
Very important. Very important.
So Yolanda, to that point that Minyon brings up, is what was the impulse and driver for you to make sure that I'm not the only black woman here at the table? I'm opening the door so that everybody else can come in behind.
That's just always kind of been my nature.
Yeah.
I mean, from the time I was a kid, I was always bringing people to the table and organizing, and I was a kid that always wanted to have my own business, so I was always making something to sell.
Yeah.
And then I got involved in politics, and I just fell in love with politics from the time I was 14 on. And I first went to work for the DNC, as I said, in 1980, and just I've had a tremendous career. And it led into me starting my own business, which I've had for 30 years. So thank you, Minyon. I appreciate that.
I love you guys so much. I just love the camaraderie. Like, the energy up here is so, you guys are like
one
family.
Other Yolanda story is that when I was working on the campaign to make Dr. King's birthday a national holiday, one of the first people that encouraged me, I was a kid, I was 21 or something, and Yolanda was working for Barbara Mikulski, and I went to the office because, you had to get signatures and commitments. So thank God I met Yolanda as one of my first, because she encouraged me to keep going and go to other offices. So I also want to thank her for that as well.
That's a funny story, because I was working for Barbara Mikulski when she was a congresswoman, and I did correspondence. I was very low level. And they came to me and said, well, there's a young woman out here that wants to meet with somebody to talk about the Martin Luther King holiday. So why'd they come get me? Because I'm the only black person there.
And I was black.
She was black, and I was so happy to see somebody else who looked like me, and we've been friends ever since.
Yeah, that's right.
On a personal note, Yolanda's my travel buddy.
Oh, I love it.
We travel together.
All around the world?
Yeah, now.
Did you go anywhere good after the election?
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah, where did you guys go to relax?
No, that was after the,
After the convention, we went on a cruise to
Italy, Mediterranean.
Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Nice.
Italy,
We went to-
Spain, and
we
France.
refused to be here for 40. What's number is he? 40?
Whatever.
45.
For his inauguration,
Zero.
so we went out of the country, and then we got our big summer vacation
back
plans.
in.
And, yeah, I know. I got back in under the wire. Under the wire. Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh yeah.
That's one of those jokes that you're like, oh yeah, that is true, right? That's sad. That's the reality. So I think we do have some audience questions. I want to make sure that we get some audience questions in here. Minyon, you alluded to this actually, in terms of Hillary winning more votes in the election. I always have to say we lost asterisk.
Yes.
Because, you know, we won more votes, as Hillary has done in every single election she has ever run in, including the Democratic primary in 2008. So what can voters do? One of the audience members wants to know what she can do as a voter to change the Electoral College. Because it's a little bit of a conspiracy right now in terms of how this all shook out in the end.
Yeah. It's certainly going to be rules changes and charter changes and bylaw changes, but I think that
That's a constitutional change.
Yeah, constitutional. So maybe we start lobbying Congress right now. And say
there's so many changes. Our democracy is broken. Whether it's just the sheer amount of money that we spend, close to $6-7 billion. Citizen United is destroying our democracy. I think we have to take a look at the Electoral College. Why not? It's been around for over 200 years, and now we've had 5 elections where the person who won the popular vote didn't win the election. And you know, why give states? No, I don't want to be prejudiced against, because Leah's going to correct me, against Wyoming and states that have very small populations weighing as much as states like California. I mean, if you think about it, California should be given the lion's share of electoral votes. So there's no question that we should take a look at it. But remember, when you talk about the broken democracy, you just can't talk about the election reform, direct elections, et cetera. But we also got to deal with the fact that so many of our citizens are not able to register or vote. And whether we're talking about felony disenfranchisement, the situation that happened on Election Day in certain areas of this country where the bad machines were put in poor neighborhoods. I can't tell you the number of phone calls I've received that day from people who were standing in line for 2-3 hours. You should not have to wait 2-3 hours. The fact is, the people where we saw voter registration and voter participation increased, it increased in states that allow people to vote ahead of time, early voting. So we got so many electoral issues that we need to deal with. But I can tell you what the Republicans in Congress who have vowed to eliminate the EAC, the Election Administration Commission, meaning they're not going to help fund elections. I mean, how the hell are we going to get the money? And with most of these Republican governors cutting back or curtailing citizen involvement in our elections, we have a lot of work to do.
And I do think on the Electoral College, 1 woman, 1 man, 1 vote. I do not think that we should have, and this is me personally, not speaking for the Democratic Party, I don't think we should have such an arcane system like that, because people, especially young people, they come out to vote and they think their vote matters. Then they realize December 16th, oh, that's really the real vote. So why did I really vote? So I do think that we have to think about this in a very sober and strategic way, but it certainly is time out.
I agree with that. I think it's so critical. I assume it's a constitutional change that has to be made, but it's like 3 million votes didn't count.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, which is so crazy because that is a lot of votes, and
That's a lot of
particularly
votes.
when you think about the margins in the states that ended up making the difference.
77,000.
Exactly, that's
And you can see why people are so frustrated.
Right. So I have another question from the audience, and I love this question. I went right to it. There are only a few men here. I want to say wave at the men and thank them for joining us for our Women's History Month presentation. How do we, and this is a question for anybody who wants to jump in and take it, how do we as men assist and continue to assist in this effort as men trying to work within the infrastructure of the party and in politics?
Get your brothers.
Yeah.
Who didn't vote for us? 7%.
Who didn't vote, and I think the best messenger to a man is another man.
Yeah.
On multiple layers, industry, economics, electoral politics, and make sure they're voting. Make sure they understand the stakes. What's important. They've got to be mobilized too. The sisters can't do all the work. We want the brothers to step up, and that requires those who are conscious, those who have an understanding of to get out and get your brother, and make sure they're going to the polls the way that we do as women. You know, if you get a woman to vote, she's taking her whole household. Children, auntie, the neighbor, down the block. That's what we do. And men don't always, it's in the culture of men that they don't function that way. But I think these times demand different behavior. And
not just different behavior, but it's an obligation because we are still disproportionately led by men. So there is no reason why that, especially African American men, especially in these troubled times, so I had a young man come to my house and he was doing some work, and so asked him who he voted for. Now he knew. There was no question in his head he knew who I voted for. So I said, "Who did you vote for?" And then I'm thinking, I'm just asking that just to hear the sound. "Oh, I voted for Hillary." And he was dead silent. But you see, we have to answer that question that Donald Trump threw out there. What do we have to lose? And right now we're proving everything that we had to lose. And I'm with Leah. We can't afford to sit back and go back. We can't afford to have laws of stop and frisk invoked into these gentlemen's minds again. So we somehow, our older gentlemen, have to take, as Maya Angelou used to teach us, each one teach one. Even if you're just teaching one young person to stay out of trouble or to get involved or to take their democracy, I think it helps us all. And then tell that person to teach somebody. Sometimes it's just each one teach one.
So one of the questions that came up a lot, and it always comes up around election time, is why does it seem that politicians always come to the Black community, a couple weeks before the election for GOTV? And we've already talked about how 94% of Black women voted for Hillary Clinton. We are a very powerful demographic when it comes to voting. So this is also to anyone who wants to jump in. How do we ensure that the party is talking to Black women and Black people when it's not, when the election's not right around the corner?
Let me answer that question first, because this is tough, because when politicians look at the polls show that Black voters are with the Democratic candidate, and they assume that since Black voters are with the Democratic candidate, they don't have to spend any time on persuasion. And we are constantly fighting that Black voters are persuasion as well as, voters that will come out and vote. So you got to persuade as well as get people out to vote. This has been a long time struggle. We fight every time for it. But that, I think, ultimately, we have to change that dynamic. We know that in campaigns where we start the persuasion early, we not only lock in, but you're guaranteed additional support. Every time the Democratic Party has come back from being defeated at the ballot box in a presidential year, when we come back in midterms, it is because you've gone after Black voters as well as Hispanic and others early. Early motivation and persuasion allows you, and I'm not just talking about running 3 or 4 ads on XM or FM or whatever, but going out with mail, with literature, and door knocks. If you do that, you're guaranteed better turnout. That's my view.
And Frederick Douglass said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand." The showing up in the last 2 weeks happens because we allow it. And I think when people get into office, they work for us. So we need to call them, because it's easy for them to go along again and say, "When are you coming? We want to host you at my church, at my union hall, at my VFW. When are you coming? Because we want to know what you're doing. You have an invitation, and we'd like you to come on the 41st of November, whatever the date is. Show up and be accountable to us. We know you just got elected in November. We want to see you in February."
Right.
We have to force them to be accountable to us, because if we don't make the demand, they will keep going just as they've been going. So I think we got to take a little bit of the responsibility. And when we do that, then we also do what Donna's saying. You got to spend the money. So you want us to turn out, because we will vote for Democrats if we vote.
Right.
So the challenge for us a lot of times in the community is making sure we actually show up, because we will have something else to do if we not motivated. I got my hair, I got I got dentist, I got grocery shop, it's raining, I'm not, so you got to make sure if that I go, because if I go, I will cast a vote for the Democrat. But if I'm not excited, I got a list of things I need to be doing that day.
And in terms of the level of excitement, it seems like, when there was so much at stake, that excites me, right? But I think that we all agree that we're going to have to come up with some new ways to talk about what's at stake. I want to thank Minyon Moore, Reverend Leah Daughtry, Donna Brazile, and Yolanda Caraway for joining me for a SiriusXM special Women's History Month presentation. And I want to thank all of you in the audience for coming out on this Thursday. It's Thursday, right? To join us. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday? Tuesday. This is a problem I had all last year when I was on the campaign, and it's still happening. I have no idea what day it is. It is Tuesday. I want to thank you. We're going to be airing this tomorrow night, so tune in to Channel 127 at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and you'll be able to hear this fabulous panel. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amen.